Was it an attempt to profit off the war? The Financial Times is reporting that a broker for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth contacted BlackRock Investments about making a multi-million-dollar investment in major defense companies right before the U.S. strikes on Iran. That's according to three people familiar with the matter. The report says that the investment, which did not go through, would have involved massive defense contractors for the U.S. government. We should note that MS Now has not been able to independently confirm this report. But a spokesman for the Pentagon has called it, quote, entirely false and fabricated, and demanded a retraction. Joining me now, Politico White House and Foreign Affairs correspondent Eli Stokols. Rick Stengel is back with us. Eli, we were hoping to get a response directly from Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon briefing today, but none of the reporters called on or asked about it. So where does this story go from here?
Well, it's a good question. You have the Pentagon's denial of the story, and you have Pentagon Defense Secretary who routinely attacks the press for making things up. And so I think we're going to see the usual blanket dismissal from the administration of this story. If more outlets are able to corroborate the reporting, then they may have more questions to answer because, as you noted, even in an administration that has somewhat normalized pay-to-play politics with things like the Ballroom Project and the president conducting business at his personal club Mar-a-Lago, a cabinet member appearing to attempt to profit off of a war that they are conducting is a shocking level, orders of magnitude different than any of the other things that we have seen if it were to be true. But again, at this point, we have a four-byline story from a credible news organization, the Financial Times, and we have the defense secretary dismissing it out of hand. That's where we are at the moment.
I think, Rick, the seriousness of this, were it to be true, cannot be overstated. But does it matter if, according to the Financial Times reporting, no investment was actually made? Does that make a difference?
No, it doesn't. Not in terms of the law. Intent, a conspiracy, all of those things, it doesn't necessarily have to have the investment made. And I think your point that today would have been the perfect time for the defense secretary to say, no, this isn't true. This had nothing to do with me. I don't know anything about it. As you say, it can't be overstated how serious this is. And in a functioning democracy, you'd have cabinet members resigning over this. And you'd also have Congress investigating it and also contemplating the impeachment power. I mean, Article 2 says that for executive officers, treason, bribery, other high crimes and misdemeanors that is the standard for impeachment. And by the way, in the 18th century, bribery didn't necessarily mean just handing money over to a government official. It meant corruption in general. That is what this is an intimation of, whether we don't know whether it's true or not.
Yeah, when I was at the White House, and at that point, our Pentagon folks, every major news organization would get their chance. That is not what's happening now. So that's the other story here, is that the questions are not being asked by people who are going to ask those tough questions. But, Rick, it was just a couple of days ago that there were insider trading concerns, especially because of the big trades made right before the president delayed attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure. How does this latest story fit in? Again, and I think the point is important, this is order of magnitude so much different than the other things we've seen. Whether or not you profit over a contract to build something is very different from something where men and women serving the United States of America are putting their lives at risk.
Yes. And what's different, Chris, is this administration, which from the very beginning has had a mercenary aspect to it. I mean, you have now foreign envoys and ambassadors and foreign ministers. When they're trying to make a deal with the Trump administration, they're putting in something that would benefit Trump personally, benefit the Trump family. The entire kind of raison d'etre of Trump's administration is about the enrichment of his own small coterie of oligarchs around him. So this is in keeping with that. Again, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. We don't have necessarily evidence that anybody in the Trump administration was involved with it, but it does seem to be of a piece with other aspects of the administration. And as you said, Chris, the fact that this is happening where young men and women's lives are at stake, where they're risking their lives for the kind of values that we prize at home. This is really a dereliction of duty.
So Eli Hegseth himself has been in the news now back-to-back days, right? This story, but then there was the other about the discomfort inside the Pentagon at the way he's infused faith and religion into matters of war. But have you heard any rumblings at all, any indication that the president feels any less strongly about his job performance? He has praised him repeatedly, including at last week's cabinet meeting.
No, and I think the reason for that, Chris, is that Pete Hegseth is there to please the usual audience of one. It is not surprising that career uniformed officers and personnel at the Pentagon would find the secretary's behavior, the way he talks about a war in which people are dying, different, off-putting, too flamboyant, not humble enough about the sacrifices being made. We hear those things from rank and file and from other people in these corners around town. But at the White House, it seems like this is exactly what Donald Trump wants from Pete Hegseth. He is there. I mean, we've seen him standing beside General Dan Kane at these briefings, right? Kane is giving the more sober, more specific assessment of what's happening in theater. And Hegseth is messaging for his former colleagues at Fox News and for the president in the Oval Office who is watching. And I think, by that metric, the secretary's performance has pleased the president. He likes the bombast. He likes the over-the-top rhetoric. It's not dissimilar from the way he communicates himself, the president. And so I think it's obvious why we're seeing that kind of breakdown where he may be alienating more traditional officers and people at the Pentagon and pleasing this president at the same time.
Eli Stokols, Rick Stengel, thank you both.
It is day 32 of the war with Iran. Here's where things stand. Gas prices have topped the $4 a gallon mark. That is the highest that gas has been in 4 years. Donald Trump now, though, appears ready to call it quits, head for the exits, potentially leaving Iran in some ways in a stronger position than before the war began. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this, quote, Trump told aides he's willing to end the U.S. military campaign against Iran, even if the Strait of Hormuz remains largely closed. Administration officials said, likely extending Tehran's firm grip on the waterway and leaving a complex operation to reopen it for a later date. In recent days, Donald Trump and his aides assessed that a mission to pry open the choke point would push the conflict beyond his timeline of 4 to 6 weeks. Trump decided that the U.S. should achieve its main goals of hobbling Iran's navy and its missile stocks and wind down current hostilities while pressuring Tehran diplomatically to resume the free flow of trade. To be clear, the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil supply passes, is only closed and in need of a complex operation to reopen it because of the war Donald Trump started in Iran. Iran seizing the strait was an entirely foreseeable consequence. Reporting from multiple outlets shows that intelligence had predicted and warned that this would happen. And now Donald Trump is considering leaving the Iranian regime in charge of this critical choke point when they did not have control of this critical choke point before the war started. This is the plot twist, though. Trump is now demanding that the same U.S. allies, who he denigrates and insults and didn't consult before the war started, fix it. Donald Trump all but confirming that reporting in the Wall Street Journal with a post on Truth Social that reads in part, quote, build up some delayed courage, go to the strait and just, all caps, take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore. Just like you were not there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil, exclamation point. That is your president, ladies and gentlemen. The sentiment was echoed by Pete Hegseth today, who had this to say.
There are countries around the world who ought to be prepared to step up on this critical waterway as well. It's not just the United States Navy. Last time I checked, there was supposed to be a big bad Royal Navy that could be prepared to do things like that as well.
who you call him Big Bad Pete. But importantly, the Royal Navy and the United Kingdom, frankly, none of our allies started the war, and none that we know of were particularly read in. Trump administration started the war. According to Marco Rubio, we did it because Israel was going to strike. Anyway, here's the damage that will be done if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Again, according to the Wall Street Journal's reporting, quote, the longer the strait remains closed, the more it will roil the global economy. Multiple countries, including U.S. allies, are reeling from the downturn in energy supply that once flowed freely through the choke point. But according to Trump and Hegseth, it is up to those allies who were unwillingly plunged into this crisis, the one we created, to now get the world's energy supply out of it. Our friend Tom Nichols writes it like this, quote, it took almost a century for the U.S. to build a global system of trade, security, and cooperation. And these guys are going to throw it away because they screwed up and have to save face, end quote. Donald Trump openly mulling, cutting, and running from the global oil supply crisis he created at the expense of our allies and the global economy is where we start today. The aforementioned Tom Nichols joins us. He's a staff writer at The Atlantic, a contributor to The Atlantic Daily newsletter, as well as a professor emeritus of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Also joining us, Wall Street Journal national security reporter Vera Bergen-Gruen is here. Also joining us, our friend, Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. He served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army in Europe. General Hertling, I start with you. Your thoughts on the public utterances of Donald Trump?
Well, if I can combine those with the derogatory utterances of the Secretary of Defense, between the two of them, I'm not sure what each day is going to bring to us, Nicole. We are now over a month into this action, as you so eloquently said, was started by President Trump, was reinforced by Secretary Hegseth and his actions with the military, and it just has gotten worse every single day. You know, you read the comment by Tom a minute ago, and both of us, both Tom Nichols and I, were part of the administrations over several decades that tried to secure alliances and build trust with other like-minded countries. That has all been thrown away in a 30-day time period, not just in Europe, but in the Middle East and in the Far East. This is what we're going to face. We've been saying for weeks now that there was no easy way out of this. I guess none of us considered the fact that the president would just say, I'm going to end my part of the war right now, even though it takes more than one to end a war. It takes both sides to do that, and in this case, many sides to do it. So we're in for some really damaged global supply chains, with many of the links having been broken over the last 30 days. And we're going to suffer the consequences of this, even though the president is now telling our allies to have a free-for-all and go into the country and just take oil. Most of our allies, I would assume, know that that's a war crime, and they also don't have the capacity to do the kinds of things that President Trump wants them to do. So, again, this is one of those courses of actions that all of us could have seen coming. And in fact, we've talked about it multiple times on this show. When you don't put military forces in line with diplomatic and economic and informational elements of power from the United States.
General, what is the impact of an American president who also has the job of the commander-in-chief tweeting in such I don't know the most sort of diplomatic and accurate word, but this is insane and erratic way. I mean, one day it's to the oil companies, just go in, basically, you know, man up. The next day it's to our allies, will you man up? The next day it's, you know, we're going to go get the uranium. I mean, the head-spinning way that the headlines are created by Donald Trump's own expressions of whatever they are, his insecurities, his fears, his glances at what's happening inside his own coalition, they are, to news consumers, ridiculous and mockable. And they're why he's at 33%. It's why he's ranking the lowest approval rating in the Fox News polling. It's why Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene are in open revolt. It's why Rand Paul is being platformed on prominent broadcast shows. It's why more Republicans are talking about running for office against Trumpism than ever before. But what does it do inside an operation like the military, where Donald Trump's other official role is the country's commander-in-chief?
Well, it's not only within the military part of the operation, Nicole, it's also with the families and with the supporters of the military, those who know how challenging it is to conduct combat operations, to put together a campaign, to have military forces conducting missions that contribute to national strategy. It's a surprise to me, as you just read that Truth Social post and mentioned some other things, that now it's okay because we've defeated, or not destroyed, but defeated the Iranian Navy and destroyed a bunch of their weapon systems. Not all, but quite a bit. And that's enough now to say, well, that was our strategic end date, or end state, rather. Those were not the strategic end states all along the last 30 days. They've changed dramatically day by day, week by week. And truthfully, Nicole, I'm not even 100% sure that we might not get another Truth Social post tomorrow morning that goes back to, hey, we're going to spend another 3 months in combat until we open the straits. It has been that jaw-dropping of a whipsaw over the last 30 days that, to answer your question, how does this apply to the military forces? I heard the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs this morning saying, oh, we've got some forces over there and they can do multiple things. No, they can't. They can do one mission at a time. And that mission only comes when you give it to them and say, here's your campaign plan in order to accomplish these political objectives. If you keep whipsawing the military and have them stationed in an area of operation for a very long time when the mission keeps changing, it will certainly affect the morale. But more than that, I can tell you, for the, let's say, 10,000 Marines and soldiers that are over there, as well as the 50,000 onboard various carrier strike groups, they've got a bunch of family members who for the last 30 days have been really tense about what might happen to their soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine. And now they're in an area of operation. No one knows when they're coming home. And those loved ones are back there saying, I'm proud of what my military person is doing, but I don't know what the hell is happening and how they are being used. I'll add one more point. The allies across the board are seeing President Trump, and I'm sure many of them will admit to what he is. But the concerning part to me is we are now associated with all these actions as the American people, because we're allowing this to happen without our Congress stepping up or without people voting for someone who's sane in terms of conducting these military operations.
Is it the sense, General, that he's not sane?
I can't judge that, Nicole, and I won't. But certainly there are some things that are being done that can be questioned. That's for sure. Anyone who is taking on the mantle of the President of the United States, who will not listen to people and understand how military operations work, how diplomacy should proceed those military operations, and who concludes after 30 days of threats and intimidations that they can just stop and let the world go about their own actions to depend on global supply chains, really doesn't have a good understanding of how things work.
David, can you make sense of Donald Trump's threat this morning and then Hegseth's claim that the regime has been changed?
So, as with everything, they're so liable to change day to day, sometimes hour to hour. It's hard to make sense. I think the clearest thing to me is that Donald Trump wants this war to end soon. He doesn't want to fight a long war. He's looking for an exit, either diplomatic, if he can find it, or military. He's trying to create options where he has really only bad ones. In that a situation like that, where all your options are bad, it's often wise to wait until better options emerge. But to be honest, making sense of this in a short-term basis is very difficult.
Does it sound like he's trying to cut and run? Should we be listening to him, or should we be watching what he's doing instead?
So I think everything that Trump is doing is part of the standard approach he takes in crises, which is to punch in the hope that the other side, the adversary, the counterparty, will quickly capitulate. He got a great success of that in Venezuela, and he's been kind of zooming ahead on that vision of what success is ever since. But I mean, for Donald Trump, everything is a deal, everything is a negotiation, and I see what he's doing now in that context.
So if the administration, if Donald Trump were to send in troops, Christopher, send in Marines, try to get the uranium, try to get a hold of the Strait of Hormuz, all of these big ifs, how would they do it?
So the forces that have been sent over, we have the Marine Expeditionary Unit out of Okinawa, the 31st MEU. That's in the vicinity of the Persian Gulf right now, but it's sitting in the Gulf of Oman. It has not transited the Strait of Hormuz, which is going to be perilous for the force. Now, it has escort ships from the U.S. Navy, but, clearly we don't have the resources needed to make safe passage there. So that's going to be challenging. And while the Marine Expeditionary Unit has what's called over-the-horizon capabilities, not to that distance, not if it's looking to take Kharg Island, certainly if it's looking to seize the both sides of the strait, it could do that. But, listen, we're talking about everybody's building up the numbers here. It's a battalion landing team of 1,200 Marines. It's a Marine infantry battalion and attachments. Everything that it needs is organic to it, but that's for a short-term seizure and stay. It's not for a protracted presence there, and we'll need reinforcements. Additionally, there's another MEU that's been tasked out of Camp Pendleton, the 11th MEU that's en route, but that's going to take some time to get on station, and still the same challenge to get into the Persian Gulf. So Kharg Island, if that is indeed on deck, they will need to get in and get closer. The 82nd Airborne also has the ability to do seizures, but again, it's an airborne capability. And while they have armor like the Marines, and while they have artillery and things they need for the initial assault, they don't have what they need to sustain their presence there.
So what does that tell you?
It says that this will be a quick hit, and then withdrawal, or potentially they will seize and be reinforced by more troops, and then this will be a protracted war, because nothing was defined up front. As a Marine, what you expect from your commander is clear guidance, articulation of what the mission is, and also the commander's intent. They will tell you what the overarching scheme is, so if they're no longer with you, you'll be able to operate on your own. None of that seems to have been delivered to anybody at any level in the U.S. military.
David, can I go back to the other threat that Donald Trump made, the one up top, which is that this is not his problem. The Strait is not my problem. It's the allies' problem. We don't even need oil from the Strait. We have it here. If you want your oil, go and get it. I broke it. You fix it. How are our allies reacting to that?
Well, they're furious. They feel that they didn't start this war off, and in many cases that they didn't support it, and now they're being left holding the bag. That said, the pain of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is going to be felt by all of our allies, by China, by Japan, and simply in their own self-interest, they need to get moving to try to facilitate some solution. If they don't, the future is going to be increasingly bleak for them economically. At some point, anger at Donald Trump for having helped create the situation needs to give way to something more pragmatic, and I would expect that'll happen soon.
All right, let's talk about the domestic upheaval, the reaction here at home from Americans. I want to play a little bit of a few interviews that were gathered by our colleague Alex Tabbitt down in Florida.
If we can bite the bullet for now, I mean, we're not all getting blown up in our backyard. So, praise God for that. As the commander-in-chief, you got to take it into your own hands, regardless. Like we say in Spanish, somebody with cojones, you know what I'm saying, with some balls to get in there and be daddy.
If you could pick one word to describe the state of the economy right now, what would that one word be?
All f***ed up. All f***ed up. I'm paying $2,600 a month for my rent, and and that ain't no bills included.
Why do you think your opinion doesn't matter to him? I mean, you're from Florida. It's his home state. You're a voter. Why don't you think your opinion doesn't matter to him?
Because I'm not rich.
So you got a mixed bag there, Mark. The first guy, Rafael, is a Venezuelan. He was really happy with Donald Trump taking Maduro out in Venezuela. How does Washington deal with that mixed bag?
Well, I mean, Washington, in responding to domestic realities and the politics of this, I mean, has to be paying attention to the fact that this war is not going over well, both within the Trump base and certainly with independent voters and the people that really sustained and really sort of underscored Donald Trump's reelection last year or 2 years ago. So, I mean, I think, look, I mean, the first person who was just interviewed said, we like Donald Trump because he has cojones, right? Yes, that is the atmospheric, that is the stylistic message that Donald Trump has presented and certainly has in this Iranian crisis. But ultimately, I mean, the downstream effects of this, whether it's diplomatically in the Strait of Hormuz or in the day-to-day of gas prices when people are, spending $70 to fill up their car, is going to have a drip, drip, drip that is not going away anytime soon, which is frankly devastating to Trump politically if he cares, but certainly a lot of Republicans politically, and most of them do care if they're trying to get reelected in November.
So we're going to talk about this in the next hour, but I wonder, does Donald Trump care? Does he, or has he already written off the midterm elections?
I mean, look, there are many theories on this. I mean, I do think that when he was reelected last year, to some degree, I mean, one of the first checks and balances on a president is his own political viability. And when you have no more, when you're not going to be held to account, certainly by your own Congress, by your own party, and by voters, when you don't have to face them anymore, you can really dial that back. And Donald Trump does, on many levels, seem to be operating like someone who is kind of beyond that caring and who is doing whatever he feels he wants to.
Let me play a little bit of Secretary Marco Rubio and getting back to our allies and the reaction overseas. Talking about NATO to Al Jazeera.
Do you believe the EU and NATO countries betrayed the U.S. at this crucial moment?
I think it was very disappointing. You have this, and again, look, the president and our country will have to re-examine all of this after this operation is over. If NATO is just about us defending Europe if they're attacked, but them denying us basing rights when we need them, that's not a very good arrangement. That's a hard one to stay engaged in and say this is good for the United States. So all of them's going to have to be re-examined.
So NATO defensive alliance, is this Marco Rubio saying that we don't need a defensive alliance if it doesn't include an offensive alliance along with it? If we want to go somewhere and do something, we need to have the buy-in from our allies, regardless of how they feel about it? David?
So the threat to NATO by the Trump administration, even if you take into account their disappointment, frustration that they're not getting support, is one of the most dangerous aspects of this crisis. Attacking Iran can be justified, even if this hasn't turned out the way people hoped. Attacking NATO, which really is a cornerstone of security for the United States, Europe, our key allies, cannot be defended. And if NATO ends up being a casualty, I think that will be a central failure of this administration that will be remembered by historians for many decades. So I think people just have to come to their senses. They have to see where their security interests lie. That applies to Europe, but it certainly applies to the Trump administration.
So I wonder about that, Mark. There are Republicans in Congress who care about NATO. Where are they?
You would think. I mean, look, they're really kind of bottled up with any number of concerns. I mean, they first of all, they're struggling to defend or even talk about this war in a way that's coherent, that sort of gets beyond the day-to-day, political challenges that it creates. Obviously, I think it gets to the same old, and it's become kind of a cliche at this point, but the truth serum thing. I mean, give a bunch of Republicans in the House or in the Senate a truth serum, and 2/3 of them will say something completely different from what they say say in public. And traditionally, and not that long ago, NATO and American alliances in Europe with Europe was just sort of a standard part of American foreign policy. And now, because Trump has been wobbly pretty much from the start on this, you have, sort of a party-wide faltering by the people who run Washington and who run our government right now. So, look, I mean, it's not that complicated after a while, but ultimately, you would think at some point that people are going to stand up for what they think they believe in.
But is Donald Trump so powerful right now, given all the polling, given the chaos, clearly the growing distaste among Americans for how erratic he is? Is he still as much of a threat to these lawmakers as he was a year ago? I understand that, they keep seeing him survive. Maybe that's what it is. They're just worried that they can't believe the evidence in front of their eyes.
Maybe. I mean, look, I'm way beyond thinking that, this is where the dam breaks. This is where the break comes. I mean, yes, there's going to be a few here and there. There's going to be a Thomas Massey here and, Mitch McConnell, whoever else there. But we just have not seen the sort of mass rebellion that I think a lot of people have been hoping for, both publicly and privately.
Breaking tonight, Donald Trump just signed a sweeping executive order designed to make it harder for Americans to vote by mail. The president voted by mail just last week, I should note. The order directs the Department of Homeland Security to work with the Social Security Administration to create lists of verified U.S. citizens who are eligible to vote in each state. It also orders the Postal Service to only send absentee ballots to voters on those approved lists. Trump's aggressive attack on mail-in voting comes as Democrats officially flip another state legislative seat. Democrat Brian Nathan won Florida State Senate District 14 in a very close special election, winning by just 405 votes. It's the 30th special election win for Democrats since Trump took office again.
Just real quick, how many have Republicans won?
Zero. Joining us now, John Bisignano, president of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, and Cornell Belcher is with us, pollster, Democratic strategist, and an MS Now political analyst. What we started with, the breaking news, is crazy. It's so crazy what he just did. So crazy. I'm sorry. It's crazy.
Continue.
It's crazy. It's unconstitutional. Mark Elias said he's going to sue, but is it not insane? The president literally just voted by mail a week ago. Literally, about a week ago, he voted by mail. Secondly, I think it's crazy because they are trying to create a national database of Americans does not exist in one place by the federal government. We don't warehouse people's information. That was at least until the Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, look, where are we headed with this? He is seriously walking towards a line where is Donald Trump just going to start sending Excel spreadsheets of his friends and saying, these are the people that get to vote. Yeah. This is the voter list now. And that's what it is. He's trying to pick and choose who gets to vote. This started with gerrymandering, right? And we could talk about that for days, and we will. But, look, this is really what he's trying to do. He wants to decide who gets to vote in this country. And he wants to completely govern it. And that's what he's trying to do again today. Like you said, he voted by mail just the other day. And then you ask him why, and he says, I was busy. And so was everybody else.
And let me get into the weeds here on it, because the truth of the matter is most voters today actually have cast a vote before Election Day. Right? In most of these states, the elections some of them aren't counted, but the elections are basically done before Election Day because most voters have already voted. And when you roll back this, when you attack this, what you're really attacking is limiting and is trying to disenfranchise millions upon millions of voters. So it becomes a really big deal if people don't have this ability to vote. You really do disenfranchise millions and millions of Americans.
How are we also proving citizenship? I think there is a through line in all of these conversations today. And between this executive order that he signed just today on mail-in voting, between the birthright citizenship case that's before the Supreme Court tomorrow, between the SAVE Act fight that's still playing out on the floor of the United States Senate, and it's going to go in the House as well, there's a question of citizenship on the table. How are we proving citizenship?
Well, the real question on the table is, it's not even a question. Let me connect the dots.
Yes.
We only want certain white people to vote. I mean, you can come at it a different way.
For someone to say that. I'm just sitting here at this table.
If only you had your own television show where you could say whatever you wanted.
Maybe in prime time, that would be great. I think America would love to hear from you.
I just wanted this conversation to marinate the way it has, because I want America to appreciate exactly where we are at this moment. And it is so profoundly un-American what we see playing out. I cannot believe, I have greater faith in the American people than Donald Trump clearly does. Certainly than any Republican in the United States Congress right now, if they get behind this crap. It's bad enough that they've kept their mouth shut on the birthright citizenship case that the Supreme Court's going to be arguing tomorrow. But they know damn well how they elect Republicans, how they have Democrats who support them vote for them, how they have independent voters vote for them, and they don't give a damn about the color of their skin, where they're from. They just want to make sure they get to the ballot box and vote. And ma'am, here's your ballot, mail it in. And so for this crap right now, to listen to this man sit his behind in that Oval Office and pontificate the crap out of his mouth about our system, America, you got to get fed up at some point. So I was just letting this marinate for a moment so y'all really understand what's at risk here. Because if you think somehow the Department of Homeland Security, working with the Social Security Administration, creating lists of verified U.S. citizens, what if your dumb ass ain't on the list? What if you aren't on the list? What you gonna do?
And also, what if you are?
And what if you are?
The government has all your information.
Right. So this is the piece for me. When you allow this government to do what it is doing, at what point do you say, Donald Trump, we got this?
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
No, but you're not. You're not missing anything. I mean, look, he's trying to build it out for himself. Look, like you said, Corona, when you're organizing, I spent almost my whole life organizing, right? You're in the field, you're talking to voters, and what you're trying to do is just get them to vote. You're trying to get them to make a plan to vote. You know, do everything that you can to get out and vote. And he's just putting up barriers. He wants to selectively choose who gets to vote in this country and when. And probably, from his perspective, he wants them to look a lot more like him than he does anything else.
Yeah. Well, if you keep making it harder to vote, guess what? Less and less people are, in fact, going to vote. But back to your point, right? At some point, middle America has to have skin in this game. Right? In the end, middle America has to have skin in this game. And what I am happy about, and I know it's one of our topics here, is that you do see middle America reacting in parts of red America when you look at the way that Democrats have been able to flip these seats. We're not talking about blue places. We're talking about red places. We're talking about seat after seat after seat that Donald Trump or Republicans have done well in, double digits in. You see it a swing back. So maybe the American people are telling us something.
Yes. I also think it is worth noting that as much as this is Donald Trump, it's also folks like Governor Ron DeSantis carrying his water, because what we are watching in Florida is an example of the fact not just playing out nationally, it's playing out in the states.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing in Florida from a redistricting perspective is fascinating. Because Governor DeSantis, he's got a real problem on his hands. That state is already gerrymandered terribly. And we know that, right? Like, that is a gerrymandered state.
Meaning the maps are wonky?
Meaning the congressional map. DeSantis drew it himself.
They redrew it already, right? Didn't he redraw it not 2 years ago?
Yeah, he redrew it. He commanded this map look exactly like it does. And now, just 2 years later, he's saying, or 4 years later, he's saying, well, maybe I could make it 5 seats better for Republicans. That's absurd. And we're seeing these special election results happen time and time again, especially in Florida. Look, he's going to have a lot of problem redrawing that map to try and shape what he thinks is going to be a better electorate for Republicans.
But you know this better than most. There is a finite number where you just can't squeeze more Republican vote out. Yeah. And if I'm a Republican sitting in the House right now, Congress right now, I'm going, wait a minute, I don't know if I want you redrawing.
Even the Senate president feels this way. The state Senate president.
Can I just real quick before you to make that point, because it's so important. Something I learned in my early battles on redistricting when I sued the governor of Maryland over the map they drew in 2000. And we went and we looked at the maps, and they trying to draw Republicans out of existence. And they did over the next 10 years. We got it from 4-4 to 1, right? What I learned in the process is that you can draw the map however you vote, especially in this environment, and we're seeing this to both your points about the special elections. It does not tell you how your voters are going to vote, because that's just a line in the neighborhood. What Republicans are failing to tap into is the attitude of the voters in those behind those lines, within those lines. And that's the piece where they're getting, Florida becomes a hot mess for them. I'm sorry, so you're
right. I mean, I guess, well, I will just note that the president of the Florida State Senate in December of 2025 cautioned the members about partisan gerrymandering because for fear of lawsuits, really, conversations that they are having. Literally, the state Senate president was like, I don't think this is legally all right for us to do. But to the point that Michael Steele just made, I think they recognize that. If they didn't know before, they saw it out of Texas when this primary just happened, and what happened with the number of the House seats there that they thought were safe, those state legislative seats that they thought they drew to advantage. Well, they only drew the House seats. They thought they drew to advantage Republicans. But that is why they're fighting this on all the fronts. They know that they could lose in the redistricting battle, so they're going to make it harder for people to vote. They know they're going to lose in the redistricting battle, and it might not come out the way they wanted to, so they're going to scare people at the polls. They know that they could lose in this redistricting battle, so the president is trying to create an environment where it feels heightened, so he has an excuse to send the military in and potentially suspend the elections. I wish I was being hyperbolic.
So
but
they're going to order the Postal Service to only send absentee ballots to voters on those approved lists that we're talking about, gentlemen.
I got a feeling people who look like me will not be on that list.
Yeah.
People in my community, I've got a feeling, won't be on that approved list to get absentee ballots or ballots, because this is about disenfranchising people.
Yes.
Now to this breaking news we're just getting from the Supreme Court, a decision in the case of Childs versus Salazar. This is a case challenging Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for minors on First Amendment grounds. Let's bring in MS Now legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher. Fallon, tell us about the decision in this case.
Yeah, Anna, this is one of those big decisions that we've been waiting for all spring. The justices here are finding that Colorado's law regulates free speech. This case involves talk therapy, specifically talk therapy. And they're saying that because it regulates free speech, it's subject to the strict scrutiny of First Amendment free speech protections. And because the lower courts here did not hold it to the high enough, strict enough scrutiny here, that they were incorrect. And of course, those lower courts sided with Colorado. So the justices here reversing that. This is an 8-1 decision. Justice Gorsuch writing the majority opinion. And the only dissent here is actually Justice Jackson. There are a few concurring opinions, but right here, the court 8-1 saying that this Colorado law regulates free speech and therefore must be subject to strict scrutiny. Anna?
Fallon Gallagher will let you continue to read in. I also want to bring in MS Now's Lisa Rubin and legal analyst Catherine Christian. Lisa, an 8-1 decision really leaving no question about where the court stands here, even though lower courts had ruled for the state, for Colorado in this case. What's your reaction to this decision?
You know, I think for anyone who's shocked by the direction that the court took in this, I would recommend to them to read Justice Kagan's concurrence, which I just had an opportunity to look at, because that really presents the real issue before this court, which is that the law didn't just regulate the contents of speech, it regulated viewpoint. What she's saying is Colorado, by banning therapists from talking about the possibility of conversion therapy or therapy that would help them redirect their sexual urges, but by allowing them to support, for example, gender-affirming care, on the other hand, is expressing a clear viewpoint and siding on one side of the issue versus the other. And Justice Kagan says, look, consider if Colorado's law was the mirror image of that. It would still be constitutionally offensive. This would be a much closer call, Justice Kagan says, if this were viewpoint neutral and instead just regulated a subject matter of speech that is forbidden, for example, in doctors' offices. That would be a much tougher call. Justice Kagan may be signaling to other states that have a concern about things like conversion therapy. There is a way potentially to do this that wouldn't trigger this 8-1 divide that you see among this court. What's offensive here is that you are telling people of one viewpoint that they can't express it while expressly endorsing the other viewpoint as permissible within the space of talk therapy, for example, Anna.
Well, and Catherine, the state had argued that this form of therapy, conversion therapy, was conduct. It was a form of treatment versus being about free speech. Clearly, the court didn't buy that argument.
No, because talk therapy, as defined at what this counselor was doing, did not involve medication, did not involve any physical intervention. It was basically her speech. Clearly, if she was giving out medication saying this will cure you of being gay, that would be medical practice. But here, this counselor was just expressing, as Lisa said, her viewpoint, which is a violation of the First Amendment to restrict that.
But Catherine raises a good point on it that I think is worth pointing out to our viewers. This challenge brought by the counselor here is what's called an as-applied challenge. She's not saying that the law is per se unconstitutional because it does also regulate conduct. There is medical therapy that's at issue here. Colorado can continue to ban that form of conversion therapy. What they can't do is regulate speech. The government of Colorado made the argument at oral argument and in their briefs that speech was somehow incidental here to conduct. And so to the extent that their law sort of aimed at speech that goes on in between talk therapy and a patient, that wasn't really what the primary objective was. And the court says it doesn't really matter what your primary objective is. As applied to this particular petitioner, this is not valid.
I mean, there are 25 other states in the U.S. that have a similar law to Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for people under age 18. So Catherine, what happens next in these states?
Well, if it targets speech, as it did in this case, then it will not be valid anymore. If it targets medication, physical intervention, that's different. So it can't be just targeted at the counselor's speech. That is a violation of the First Amendment.
Ladies, stay with me. I want to bring in Leah Littman, professor of law at the University of Michigan Law School. Again, this was ultimately a free speech case. Leah, so how did the court find Mrs. Child's First Amendment rights were violated by this law?
It is a free speech case, but I think it's important to recognize that in this instance, the free speech, the speech of the therapist, is a form of treatment. That is what medical professionals do in this setting. And that is why Colorado argued that it could restrict the form of treatment that this medical professional offer. Now, I understand, of course, that this law reflects a viewpoint. Basically, the law told the counselor that she can affirm someone's gender identity. If they say, I am transgender, she can say, that's good, that's fine, let me help you with the transition. She can't, however, say, well, let me kind of adjust you back to your sex assigned at birth, and that's fine too. And again, that is a viewpoint, but it is a viewpoint that recognizes transgender individuals exist, that gender identity is real. And I just don't know that you can really separate that viewpoint from the conduct of medical treatment or a professional. Imagine, for example, that a state tells a doctor, you can't tell someone with an eating disorder, yes, you should eat less, right? You are right to think that you are too thin. That too is regulating a form of speech. It is regulating speech in the form of medical treatment. And I think part of the concern with the majority opinion is that it understates the extent to which talk therapy and therapy is inevitably going to be a form of speech, and that this Colorado law was designed to recognize the importance of recognizing transgender individuals. And there's a deep irony to the court releasing this opinion, which suggests the state is impermissibly reflecting a particular viewpoint that trans people exist on Transgender Day of Visibility.
Well, and I know Colorado had enacted this law again back in 2019 is when it went into effect, hasn't imposed any penalties against Childs or others when it comes to conversion therapy, talk therapy involving this law. But they put forward this law because of potential harm that medical institutions found this type of therapy could cause. According to 2020's American Journal of Public Health findings, LGBTQ plus youth who underwent conversion therapy were more than twice as likely to report having attempted suicide than those who did not. And according to a study from the American Psychologist Association in 2021, conversion therapy was also associated with higher rates of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. Did the court address those findings in their decision today? And what do you see as the potential path forward here? What's next?
It really did not address those findings. It instead focused on characterizing the law as regulating speech and the laws reflecting a particular viewpoint. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's sole dissent did focus on the harmful effects of conversion therapy. My guess is states like Colorado will attempt to reformulate and reframe their laws so that the laws aren't categorized as viewpoint discrimination. They might come back and say, for example, licensed medical professionals cannot offer a form of treatment that falls below accepted professional standards of care. That doesn't necessarily reflect a particular viewpoint about gender identity or sexuality. But the reality is, in effect, that is going to do the same thing as this Colorado law that the court just struck down, because it falls below professional standards of care for licensed therapists to counsel people to disregard and deny their gender identity.